It's time for another Dice Tower review with the Chief, Bart Brunchine.
Hey, it's the Chief from the Dice Tower. Today I'm joined by fellow Hamtagger, Judd Vance, and we're going to be talking about Coral Sea, which is Volume 2 of the Campaign Commander series.
Yes.
Who's the designer again? I always forget.
Francisco Ronco.
Ronco. You roll your R's better than I do. He's a designer from Spain. Coral Sea is all about the Japanese and the Allies battling in 1942 in the South Pacific.
Yes, it's not just the Battle of Coral Sea. It's the entire campaign, Guadalcanal, Port Moresby, all of it.
Two-player game, war simulation, operational level. Let's go in and we'll take a closer look, and then we'll come back and give you our thoughts.
Alrighty, this is an overview of the map. You have these different areas like Rabaul. I don't know if you can see that. It says 10 for the 10 victory points. Guadalcanal 5. You have these different islands from this region. Port Moresby, Nomia, Espiritu Santo, places like that. They have the different victory points. Japan's going to start with 10 and 1 over here. I think it's Kabing is how you say it, with 11 points, and the Allies have everything else. So Japan is going to have to spread out and conquer these areas. The first thing about this is this game has a very, very unique system for how you work your turns. Here, each player has a chit. One side says cards, one side has a map. Each player will place their chit out there with one side up, cover it, and then you'll reveal them simultaneously. Now, depending on what you play, depends on what happens. If you put a card out, if both players play card, you're each going to do a card action. That means you can draw a card if you're not at your hand limit. You can play a card for an event, and I show some of these, or you can discard a card for a supply point or supply marker. There are also cards that give them to you, but if you don't have them and you're desperate, you can always discard for one. And whoever has the initiative, and that is Japan at the start of the game, the Allies will not get the initiative until they conquer so many areas and cause so many casualties, then they'll have it for the rest of the game. Whoever has initiative goes first. If one player plays map and the other plays card, the guy who does the map will do his operation first. This allows you to move pieces on the map. Now, this case, the Allies played it. Even though they don't have initiative, map always trumps card. Now, this is where it gets cool. Both players play map. Only one guy's going to get a go. The other guy basically loses his turn. Each player rolls a d10. The guy with initiative adds 2 and wins ties. So the other guy who doesn't have initiative has to be wise and try to figure out, okay, he's low on cards, he's probably going to restock, or he needs more resource markers, this is my time, or sometimes I'm just desperate and really need it. This creates a very cool bluffing aspect. Now, with the cards themselves, I have some examples down here. There are different borders of cards. The goals are just your standard events. There's an air attack, reinforcements. A red card you can play at any time when a guy's doing something on the board. It's just a stop and interrupt, submarine attack in this case. Blue cards, when you go into battle, you can play them and get a combat advantage. But usually when you're playing the card event, you're playing it for one of these yellow cards. So that's the way the basic system works. There are not really one turn, two turn. Both guys could play card and restock their cards. Just play it till the deck runs out. So there's really it's not an unlimited number of turns, but it's not your typical you go, I go type of system. Okay. Now here's an example of an onboard operation where the allied player had played the map. So the guy who plays map goes first. What that allows you to do is, these are supply markers. They call them resource points in the game. You pull one off of an area anywhere, get rid of it off the board. That will get you 6 supply points. There's your track right there. And then whatever you wish to do is going to cost points. The way this works is if it's on the ground, if your supply marker's on the ground, it can activate any ground area within 3 zones of it. If it's at sea, it can activate that sea zone or any adjacent land zone. So there is a range, and like you're pulling one and moving a guy halfway across the board. So in this case, he does it here so he can activate everybody in this sea zone. And these are 2 separate zones, just to show it. So he does it and he moves. So to move a fleet, and this is 2 supply points. Things you can do is if you have a damaged unit in your import, you can flip it back over. If you get disorganized in combat, you'll have this marker on, does bad stuff. You can get rid of those, they cost points. You can build airstrips, things like this, move ground units, move naval units, they all cost points. So it's how you spend your supply points. In this case, you spend 2, and he wants to move over and attack these guys. And you're lugging around these supply points at sea. So these resource markers. So that's part of the logistical wizardry of this game, is that you have to manage your supply in a simple, elegant, but yet a pretty deep system. Okay, the next section I want to talk about is the combat section. Very unique system. It's unlike anything else I've ever seen out there. When you go into combat, you got these 3 values on here. This is how many battle chits you're going to draw. It's called your tactical value. Carriers have higher values. That's why they're more valuable and why you want to protect them. The 7 is a cohesion value. You're going to roll against it to see if you fail, and if you fail, bad stuff happens. It's on a D10. You got to roll higher than it to fail. And the 6 is the movement values. In this case, I have a combat here. The HS is like a heavy cruiser battleship. LS is like light cruisers, destroyers, and CV is carrier. These are not individual ships. These are kind of like small task force. So this group is going into combat. 1's Australian and 2 Americans against 3 Japanese. First thing you're going to do is you're going to draw chits according to the highest unit you have on the board. For the Allies, it's this 2 on this HS. For the Japanese, it's the 3 from their carrier. The reason lots of them are good is because part of it is you might have a better chit. You have a better chance of drawing one. Another one, some of these chits are bad. Like this one here I put on. It's a ground chit for a ground battle. But you check yourself. You never check the enemy. It's called bad communications. You fail, you're disorganized. Anyways, you draw your chits, and then you play one. And then you do what it says. Like in this case, this is an airstrike chit. The Japanese player, when the Allies play it, the Japanese is going to pick one of these ships and check it, and they're going to add 1 to their die roll because of this. So like if you pick the carrier, he's only checking against a 4, and then you're going to add 1 to the die roll. Now, when you play these chits, you do what their effects are. You have to see if you meet the prerequisites. For example, if you have a torpedoes chit, you're playing in combat, you have to have a light ship, kind of like a destroyer is what it's saying. Or if you have an airstrike chit, you have to have a carrier in the battle or an airstrip so close to the battle. If you don't have it, you just discard the chit and draw again. Anyways, so there are effects. Sometimes it's on one side, sometimes on the other, sometimes it's on both. Instead of consulting the rule book, if you're watching this video, you probably haven't memorized the stuff like I have. So these files are on BGG in the file section. I created these. Got the inspiration from John Boone on this. It has the picture of the chit, just like this. It tells you the name, how many there are. This is just a shortcut nomenclature you learn after a little bit. It tells you check 1 Japanese unit. Japanese player picks, rolls against his, this is a ground combat chit, but work with me on this. They check against their first number, their cohesion number, roll against it. If they fail, they're disorganized. That means they put a marker on that gives them -1 on all these values, and they have to retreat from the battle. The Allied unit checks, same thing, and if he fails, he's disorganized. This Japanese might have will chip, 1 Allied checks, and he adds 1 to the die roll. 1 Japanese unit is automatically depleted. It's kind of like a bonsai charge of sorts. So some of these have prerequisites. This combat takes on a tactical nature, because if you might have 3 heavy ships, 1 carrier, and 1 light ship. You don't want to check that light ship just yet, because if he fails and leaves the battle, you're sitting there holding a torpedo chit that requires it. Now, when you draw them, if you don't have the prerequisites, you discard and draw again. If you're holding it in your hand, when you go to play it, it's dead. You basically lost your combat turn. So you get real careful on how you balance these chits. And it's something you just play it a few times, and the more you play it, the more you see it, that this is a really brilliant system.
This is Judd's favorite Pacific game?
It's when we did our top 5 games of all time, this is my 4th favorite game.
All right. So why?
First of all, it's just unlike anything I'd ever seen. Now, I'd never played the Stalingrad game at the time because we use similar mechanics, but I was just really blown away at how no zone of control. You see stuff in games that you see borrowed from other games. This one, I always said, it felt like he was designing in a vacuum and had never played another war game. I mean, the combat system, it was bizarre, but I loved it, especially the more I got into it and started understanding the nuances of it. The way you work the supply, it's not this really complicated supply, but it's not as simple as just leave a path to the right side of the board or something. Mm-hmm. You actually really have to think your logistics through. And a comment I've heard about this game a lot is the first time you'll play it, you'll restart it because you'll outrun your supplies and have stranded ships in the middle of the ocean. So it makes you think in a whole different way. Think through the logistics. You plan your operations a lot more carefully. You just don't throw it out there willy-nilly and roll a die and hope to get lucky. I mean, there's a lot of planning, but it's not a big, like an OCS brain burner. it's, the rule book's like 8-9 pages long or something.
That's a good reference. The Campaign Commander series, the very first game in the series from Runkel was Roads to Stalingrad. Then he comes out with Coral Sea, and then he's got Punic
Island. It's the first Punic War.
Right, and then he's got a fourth one. Is it out?
It's not out. He's been working on it. I don't know what it's on, but he has told me that there's a fourth one in the works. Now this game has a lot different feel. There is a lot of dice rolling in combat. There will be a few comments about it, but the thing about this game is there's not a ton of combats. You're not fighting every turn. You got to get all your supplies together. You got to get everything just so. And the great thing about it is I would hate to do all this planning for turn after turn, go out there and lose because I rolled a 6 and you rolled a 1. So if you get a bad die roll, it just makes a ship flip maybe or become disorganized and leave the battle, but you're still in it. So you don't get the swinginess. And those battles are high drama and they're very tense. And there's part of the reason you have a little more die rolling in this is there's a lot more cohesion in a Japanese Marine unit than a bunch of Russian people in the streets of Stalingrad grabbing some guns and being forced to the front. And that's designed into this. Now there's a lot more battles because the Russians had waves and waves of people to throw at you. So there's less battles, but the battles are a lot more intense. So there's more die rolling. But in this, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 naval battles, and a couple of them are really big. So yeah, you'll have some die rolling, but it's not a game where you're just sitting there, your wrist is getting tired.
Yeah, really, he's really captured the war in the South Pacific between these giant, conglomerations of Japan and the Allies or the Commonwealth, and it's a very hard thing to pull off. So hopefully you've enjoyed. Give this a chance. His aids, Judd's aids that are on BGG, his written review that's also on BGG. If you want to go look at that, go take a look.
I created, if you're in a Vassal, go out there. I put Vassal tutorial files on how to play this. You just follow along. I tell you, I give examples of how to do it. Then I play a game where I play like a third of a game, and it's funny because I surprise myself. It's like, hey, I can attack Port Moresby. I didn't see that. I left that wide open.
And if you want to play a Vassal game with Judd, he's all over that.
Yeah, I made the module.
So contact him. He's Air Juddin on BGG.
Yep.
So he loves Vassal. So all right, thanks guys. Anything else you want to say? I know it's one of your favorites.
One of the other things in this is that the game itself encourages you to do things that you do historically. It's not a fiddly rule of you must do this or you will. Just by the nature of the game, you're Japan, you will go out for Guadalcanal. You'll start doing the expansion just like they did and the little historical events. It's not a card-driven game, but the little historical events, you'll see it in there, and it works really slick at capturing the history and the simulation value for an easier package.
Right. It doesn't get all gamey in terms of what you're trying to do.
Yes.
All right. See you guys later.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.